There we go. Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. We're live.
Yay, it's us.
It's
Hello.
us. If you pull us up.
Oh, yeah. Still setting things up.
There we go.
Started. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi, Caitlin.
You want to turn the music down?
Oh. It looks to be quieter than us. There we go. Yes, you should be able to hear. And everything on my end says that the sound is going through. You may want to check your tab. Hold on. Oh, our quality is bad.
Uh-oh. Oh, I can hear it. I can hear it.
You can hear us?
Yeah.
It looks to be quieter than us. There we go.
Yay.
Oh.
You
should be able to hear. And everything on mine.
Yeah,
Wow.
I just turned mine off.
The video. I hope it looks okay.
Technology.
We have sound now. How is the video? That becomes the ever important question.
Is it a PowerPoint slide?
Is it a stop motion? How are we looking?
We have sound on. Yay! It's like, I don't know. I can't see on my end because my phone always
I think closing the music helped. All right, sorry, no music because my computer didn't like that.
No music for you.
None. But hello, I realize that I know. There we go. We have been busy today.
Yay.
Busy.
Yeah.
But before we get into the stream, hello everyone, and thank you so much for stopping by to hang out with us. Nessa,
Yes,
could you please introduce yourself?
Of course. Hello, I'm Nessa. I use she, her pronouns. Usually I find cute indie games that I very much like and I show them to my lovely husband Casper. However, my laptop this week decided to die. So we're exploring something a little different today. But before we get into that, would you like to introduce yourself?
Before we get into that, if you'd like to help us financially secure Nessa getting a new laptop, ways to support us are right here.
And
moving. We are also in the process of moving. So if you want to help us buy furniture or any other household necessities, right here is how you can look us up on Throne, or you can put apostrophe wish list in the chat and our Throne link will pop up. Anyway, now that I'm done shilling us out, hello, I am Casper Oliver. I am her husband, and I am also a queer gamer, and I love to play new games, and I have a bad habit of replaying the same games over and over, so it's great.
You also watch the same things over and over, so it really is just a consistency.
I'm autistic, leave me alone.
And all the lovelier for it.
But that is great because she'll show me new games, and then I'll get fixated on those games, and yeah, the cycle continues.
Yes, as they've been vetted by me.
Yes.
The wife.
And I use he, they pronouns. All of our socials are up above. We work with Vesperians Productions. You can find that down there.
Oh, and then our pronouns are over here.
Here, if you ever forget.
Yeah, and then there's more links over here.
I already pointed to all this.
Yeah.
You're
and
late.
Then if you want to read the chat, it's over here. And if you want to look at the flag, it's over here.
Okay. Also, for some reason, the chat's not popping up.
Oh, no. No chat.
No chat, I guess.
Only us.
I guess. Yeah, well.
Get good.
I've done what I can, chat. I've done what I can.
Just know we love you. Wherever you are.
So, you said we were trying something new today.
Yes.
what is it that we're doing today?
Okay. Well, I thought a fun little thing. So, me and Casper are nerds.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see by the everything. But we also play D&D. And so I have DM'd for games that Casper's been a player in, and Casper has DM'd in games I have been a player in. And I thought it would be a fun time to kind of talk about our experiences with crafting a campaign for Dungeons and Dragons and just like fun little things.
And that's also interesting because not only have we DM'd solo,
Yes.
but we have also co-DM'd before.
Did.
We have co-DM'd a mini campaign where she and I tackled different aspects of the story and like took over different rooms and stuff. That was really fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing today.
Yeah, it was super fun. So, in that case, how about we get started with talking a little bit about, like, just a really quick summary of some of the campaigns that we have run, and kind of like what vibe do we go for? So, Casper, we'll start with you. Like, what? Okay, I'll start since somebody is eating and busy.
Oh, I did the text setup.
So you get a tasty treat as a reward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I thought we could start with kind of going over some campaigns that we've led and kind of like the vibes and tones that we like to use when DMing.
Mm-hmm.
So Casper does have Next List Productions, which every Monday has their own campaign. And I did co-DM Lotus House. That was on Nexus. Super fun. But otherwise, I tend to do home games with Casper and our roommate Cecil, and sometimes others. One of which is Jason. Two of which, Jason and Olivia, who have both appeared on The Experience in other D&D sessions, and specifically Verbena, and then Jason's been in pretty much all of them.
Yep.
So primarily I do home games. What I like to do is what I want.
Yeah, that's fair.
But specifically I like something that's lighthearted but still has like tension and dramatic moments.
Mm-hmm.
So I describe it as kind of like a dramedy. So like Scrubs type, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Leverage, like those types of TV shows where like you'll have the good funny ha-has, the puns, the ridiculousness, but there's also still that element of just like something bad can happen and it can be devastating. So, but I also don't like to... So I have different death mechanics, in the sense that the people I play with usually put a lot of thought and heart into their own characters, and so don't want to see them die prematurely. And I do spend a lot of time like crafting character arcs. So I don't have a lot of player character death, but I do like things to still have a weight and a price. So I do like to play a lot with like how far are you willing to go to do a certain thing? What are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to pay?
Yeah.
But then I also do very silly things like put my player characters through a
job interview.
Yep, through a job interview or through a like speed dating, that sort of thing. I primarily I play very fast and loose with rules, and so I like to just focus on what would be funny or what would be
fun.
Yeah, what would be funny or what would be fun.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way.
Yeah.
And yeah, one day, Caitlin, I have to do DM session and have you be a player because that would be super fun.
Heck yeah.
Eventually, one day, because oh god, I'm tired.
After the move.
One day, we'll find something. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And so with that, Casper, what types of campaigns have you run? And what's kind of the vibe you like? What's the tone that you like to hit?
So, my tone as a DM versus my tone as a player are two very different things. when I'm a player, I much prefer the way that Nessa DMs or No Man has.
No Man is a very good
if
DM.
if you want to watch some really fun D&D streams, watch No Man. Shy, who's in the chat lurking, was a wonderful DM on Foster's channel.
Nico is also a really good.
Nico is also a very wonderful DM, but Nico is more similar to me, where as a DM, we love the funny bits, we love the dry humor. Also, just gotta follow. Thank you, Alfred Hopkins, for the follow. But no, we primarily like. Oh, hi, Jason. You're beautiful as well. And we mentioned Jason, who is also a DM and player on Nextless. There he is in the chat. But yeah, I as a DM, I like the funny, but not in a dramedy sense. More like. Well, my first ever campaign that I ran, and it wasn't even a campaign, it was run as a one-shot the first time, and I DM'd for like 13, 14 hours.
Oh, yeah. So the original
Welcome to Nextless.
Oh, yeah. Some of us got to do the original Welcome to Nextless.
Yep, so Nessa played Mikhail, who ended up being an NPC. Cecil played Nilo, who was one of the gods that they interacted with, and then there was another friend of ours who played a paladin, and ran that as a one-shot on my birthday. And that is, well, no, that wasn't the first time I DM'd. I ran that like, oh, you all got trained. It was basically an isekai story where you all got sucked in, and I gave you your character sheets or whatever, and you had to figure yourself out. And that
very brief.
Yes, so we did one. That was going to be a campaign. It ended up only being one session, and that is actually how the character Wallace was invented. He was invented there. So when Wallace showed up again in the first Welcome to Nextless game, it was strictly so my players could have a callback.
And I remember that one being. It was very dark, very horror.
And most of my games are. Most of my games get dark. And because I typically use D&D and tabletops to cover very heavy topics, I'll admit I've been kind of tired of doing that. So it's made it not as fun to run things so real. Because, like, well, for example, my current game for Welcome to Nextless, with Nextless Games, is Clocked In, which is a modern urban fantasy with anti-capitalism and blah blah blah, and it just
love the setting.
It's fun, but it's a little too real because they're dealing with things like corruption and classism and poverty and all this other stuff.
I get it. And we tend to use D&D as kind of like escapism. It's part like having fun with friends and being social and like getting to bounce off one another, but there is still like an escapism to it.
Yeah.
And when your escape is looking a lot for like where you're coming from,
it's not as fun.
It's not as comfy.
But you mentioned that I do horror. I want to go on the record. I don't like horror. I don't. The funny thing is that's not quite true. I love a lot of the aesthetics and elements of horror. I don't like being scared.
So maybe Tim Burton-y?
Yeah, I like Tim Burton. I love, like, Addams Family. Jason introduced me to the Munsters, which I really liked.
Yeah, Guillermo del Toro.
Guillermo del Toro. Mwah. Love his movies. I like, or American Me Alice, those games. They aren't to scare. They're just to make you think. Or... hi Shusho, Nextless Games, DIY dating sim. But yeah, so I like the aesthetics of horror, and I love pushing the boundaries with like what's eerie, what's weird, while respecting players' comforts. I always ask for no-goes, triggers, blacklists, what are things that you do not want me to touch on, and here are my things that I will not be touching on.
Yeah, since the main goal of D&D is for everyone to have fun.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. It just so happens that my players often tell me to ruin them and make them cry. unfortunately for them, I'm a bottom. I don't know how to. Yeah, so wow, I committed to that joke. But yeah, no, so it's very much like my players love to push the ante and love to push more, so I love to give more. But I'm kind of wanting to go more in the fun direction. So I'm excited about this stream because I'm excited to learn from one of my favorite DMs, my wife.
Oh shucks. Oh shucks.
And if you want to see her amazing DM skills, you should go onto the Thesperians Productions YouTube and watch Lotus House. Nexus Games Lotus House.
Goodness.
She helped run that.
Casper.
What? How am I scaring you? I mean, I don't know what it is that I said, but that's valid.
Well, I also wanted to touch a bit because I know you start with a lot of horror and a lot of dark, and I know that's because of some familiarity that you have with the horror scene. So I did want to ask, kind of what elements do you pull from outside of D&D that you pull to help with the storytelling in D&D?
Okay, so
because I know that we pull from different areas.
Yes, we we've joked that you can tell that we have different approaches to it. She has the English major approach, and I have the theater major approach. But I am also an improv actor, a trained improv actor, and also have been surrounded by horror since childhood because both of my parents were both huge movie buffs.
I saw she was just commenting.
Yes, Nessa Fan Club.
Goodness.
I am the founder.
I think Caitlin's the founder.
No, that is correct. Caitlin is the founder. I'm the president.
I'll take that. But also, yes, Caitlin, I also love escapism in my D&D.
But anyway, as I was saying, yeah, so both of my parents were huge horror movie buffs, so I was always around it. And with my dad making independent horror and me going into the indie horror scene, especially queer horror, that my approach to it comes from kind of how things are used. I'm trying to figure out how to word this because Nessa didn't tell me what any of her questions were.
Nope, this is all a surprise.
So things that I like to use are typically it's not things that I saw. See, Jason is also a huge Nessa fan.
You also have to fight Caitlin for the presidency.
Listen, Caitlin, you are the founder. You established it. You're the head honcho. You're the Grand Vizier. Okay? But I am her husband. So pity me and give me some sort of status. Listen, I love my wife. Listen, everyone knows I love my wife. But listen.
Your wife most of all.
Caitlin has seniority. I have to acknowledge that. So I'm kind of at her mercy, and that's okay. I trust Caitlin.
Amazing.
But as I was saying, the things that actually inspired me the most about horror isn't what I've seen done well. It's what I've seen done very poorly that I try to then do properly.
Okay.
Like mental health in horror, or queerness in horror, or how survivors are treated in horror, and also how victims are treated in horror. These are a lot of things that I like to explore with like Jar of Rebuke. Also, I am a monster lover, both of like river monsters and vampires and werewolves and all that, and ghosts. But I am also quite a fan of like kaiju horror movies. Yeah, so I like to pull from a lot of those elements, which also means I like to pull the eco side of things, which you see more in kaiju movies. They tried to do it in The Happening, and it was terrible. The Happening itself was terrible. M. Night Shyamalan, I don't care if you hear this, that movie was trash. I own it on DVD because I like to watch it and make myself. You know when you need to feel something?
Like trash.
No, it's like, you know when you need to feel something and you just want to feel angry. When I just want to feel angry, I'll put on The Happening by M. Night Shyamalan. It's all bad.
So you like to So through the media that you consume, you like to take the topics that are explored and the mistakes, and then bring what you would have wanted to see and put that into your D&D.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's very fair.
I like to be fan servicey, but not in the allosexual way, but in the like narrative way. Narrative fan service.
Okay,
So
yeah.
like
The tropes that you would have wanted to see.
yeah, and that I know that other queer people would like to see. You know, so being in the queer community, that also affects a lot how I DM and what I use.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. And so that's kind of like goes into the topics that you like to include. And I know you mentioned that as a professional improv actor, you kind of take those skills and put that into your DMing. I know for me, my skills tend to come from my academic experience. So I have a bachelor's degree in English with a minor in linguistics, and then a master's degree in creative writing, specializing in nonfiction. And so I had to do a lot of reading, a lot of reading, a lot of writing. And so I tend to think about my DMing in the sense of arcs. So I like to make sure like the plot has an arc that we're following, and then also that each character has their own arc, that they're looking for something and they're finding that. And so I think both of us tend to bounce off of our players and our player characters a lot, but in very different ways, I think.
Yeah. I want you to go first, actually, because
Oh.
you just asked me a bunch of questions,
Okay.
so I want you to start. So how do you? Well, first I want to ask, because I mentioned a bit of how I use my horror, and I'm sure we'll get into the theater aspect, but I want to know, since you just mentioned it, and because I am forever proud of my wife and how hard she works to get through undergrad and grad school, how is it that you feel you use your skills as someone with a master's in creative writing?
Okay.
How do you think that you transfer those skills to your DMing style?
Okay. Good question. I like it. So with my master's degree, I read a lot of like autobiographical and biographical works, especially in dealing with humor for very like hard topics. So like Liars Club by Mary Carr, The Glass Castle, stuff like that. And so I tend to kind of look at the characters, and I try to make characters that have their own motivations and their own like kind of contradictions, in the sense that people can be contradictory to themselves, like what they're trying to go for versus like where they are now, or their hypocrisy, or just them trying to be somewhere but they're currently not there.
Yeah.
And so not only that, it also tends to affect my pacing, in the sense I'm always thinking of like what has happened in a previous session and then using that in moving forward to future sessions. And then also thinking of themes in the sense of, so for instance, in a previous campaign I ran, I pretty much took D&D and just reskinned it as Transformers because I love Transformers, and then I made my husband and our roommate and friend Cecil love Transformers.
So good.
So we did this, and so Transformers itself deals a lot with things like war and sacrifice and that kind of hardship.
Systemic oppression.
Yep. And then just like also dealing with authority and then also culture, things like that. And so with Casper's character,
Hitchwire,
who was running away from a lot.
Yeah, yep.
So I'm like, okay, so what are the themes that we want to explore with Hitchwire, who has done bad things, and is trying to run away from all that, start anew. But he's also an asshole. and
yeah.
And is very much like combative. And I wanted to work with that in the sense of like, okay, what, like, is there something that could like get underneath that armor?
Yeah.
Not intended. So in the sense of like, okay, is the combativeness of Hitchwire something that is a defense mechanism, or like to prevent anything else, or is it a punishment for himself? I've done bad things. I don't get to be close to anyone, and no one can care for me.
The answer is yes to both, honestly.
And then we get to like, okay, if Hitchwire is presented with his past, how is he going to deal with that? Is he going to go to the friends that he has made, or is he going to try and hide what has happened? And so, like, I like questions, I think is what it is. And so I like questions, and then I use that to like carve out these character arcs so we can answer the questions. And I don't find the answers, the character does, the player does. But I like to present them, and so we have the character arcs, and then eventually the plot arcs.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I use what I've learned in kind of that mapping for novels and biographies and character exploration, and I present that into my DM style.
And it works really wonderfully, honestly. Like, she's gotten so... It's interesting. She's really piss poor at physically describing things.
Like
telling us what people look like or telling us what things look like.
Only vibes.
It's only vibes. But it still will always feel so cinematic because the narrative and the actions and the characters and the flow all feels very paced like a story.
Yay.
So... And I also want to use that to segue back to your question.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you, all right, with all that said, what is your style of engaging and interacting with your players? How do you use your experience and your knowledge to bounce off of your players to continue to build the story? Because it's very collaborative.
Okay. Well,
I think that was what you asked.
More or less, yeah. So... Because I know, like, you do it in an improvisational way.
Yeah. My training affects how I do it versus yours.
Yeah. So I tend to kind of look at character and character backstory and just try to find, like, the hooks of, in the sense, what does the player not want to happen? What does the player character not want to happen? And what does the player character want to happen?
Right.
And then we have these dual poles of what we're going to and what we're going away from. And then also checking in with the player of, player, what do you want to happen? And what do you not want to happen? Is there something in specific that you want to explore with your character? So, for instance, so in our recent home game, Cecil played a Earth Ganazi who kind of was very much a like ecological protector and warrior, and wanted to like make sure to protect the Earth. We need it, type of thing. But we were also exploring of like how far is too far, and then also dealing with authority figures, and that was one of the major themes of the campaign, was how do we deal with authority? How do we trust authority? How do we not trust authority? What is accepted? What isn't? And so it came to like, okay, I did go to the player, so and be like, hey, I have an idea, but it will physically change your character and will require sacrifice. And Cecil was like, go for it. So I presented Cecil with a magical item that was sentient. And so Cecil's character, Dvalin, now had this like sentient like armband, like gauntlet that gave the character like a lot of power, but would also be slowly corrupting that character. And so that would be an authority figure that was also making the character question other authority figures. And so we were kind of going back and forth. Yes. Hi, Cecil. I'm talking about Dvalin. So...
As a fun fact, this campaign is where those thieves from the most recent Clocked In episodes are from. Dvalin is one of the thieves that Saris, Rami, and Dee Dee almost fought. So context for the audience. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, and so we went forward with exploring those themes of just partly this like sense of like you have this authority figure like over your shoulder judging you this entire time, but then it turned into like exploring these other themes of kind of the solitude that comes from like being uncertain of who to talk to about a problem that you may be having, or even just like this kind of like loneliness that comes from that, or this sense of like power and trying to balance that power and looking away from the price that may come from it until it forces itself forward.
They're all just saying hello.
Corruption and exchange of power. But yeah, so, and that's something that I talked about with both the player and then gave choices to the player character. So the player character like always had the choice to go to someone and be like, hey, so I have this armband and it talks to me. And furthermore, the player character always had the choice to like lop off their arm if need be. Like,
yeah, true.
Yeah. So there a lot of choices that could have been made, and we could have explored all of those, and I kept it open ended that way. And then we just kind of moved forward as events came up. Yeah. So that's kind of how I like to balance mine and how to bounce off of player characters. It helps that everyone I DM for is a friend of mine, and so I tend to come into it already with an idea of like what that person likes and dislikes.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting that Shusho points out, I do not hear recent campaign events. Well, we're getting to those. So, in comparison, because you kind of brought it up for me to answer that question first, and then I said...
then you reverse Uno'd me.
Yes. So, carrying on with where... why does it look like our video stopped? Is it just on my end? I hope not.
Oh.
Okay, no, it was just on my end. Weird. Sorry. My Twitch is weird on my phone. But with how I use so when I was trained to be an improv actor, I was trained to do murder mystery parties. And basically the core tenets of these murder mystery parties is you have to know how basically you go into the party knowing who the killer is, as us actors.
Yeah. The
suspects in the audience don't know. But we know who the killer is, what the evidence is, what information needs to come out at certain points. Sorry, I keep getting distracted by the chat. But yeah, so it's like you know where you're going, but you don't know how you're going to get there because you have audience members play certain suspects, so you have no idea how they're going to play the character, if they're going to read their lines right, you know, etc., etc. What that has led me to do as a DM is I like to know where is the story going, right? So there are certain times where I'm like, I have no idea. When like sometimes I'll like lose steam and I'll be like, I just want the story to kind of guide itself for a little bit because I'll be a little less inspired. But I'll still kind of know where I'm going. Because as long as I know my end goal, I can handle anything that gets thrown at me. Because of my years of doing murder mystery parties as they were. Okay. And how this leads to the player-character interaction is, for example, with Welcome to Nexus, all right, I knew how the story generally was going to end. From the beginning, I had the information that my characters, unless they did something to get themselves killed, which I also don't like player death, unless it's like discussed. Because the second time I ran Welcome to Nexus, we had a character death in the finale. And it was Perry's character, who Perry is a long time, actually one of our first ever Patreon supporters. If you've been in the Thesperian Star of Rebuke sphere, you've probably seen him. But his character actually died and ascended with Thespis. But that was pre-discussed. Well, him dying was pre-discussed. Him ascending with Thespis was not discussed, and I apparently made him cry, but in the good way, you know?
Yeah. So it very much is this, like, so giving the, like, hey, here's what may happen, in the sense of, like, here's this nebulous idea.
Actually, that time Perry brought it to me.
Okay.
That time Perry was like, yeah, and I think his story, once he finds this item, is that he's going to die. And I'm like, well, all right, you said it.
Yeah. And I think similarly how I went to Cecil, like, hey, this may change your character.
Yeah.
In which case it was said character lost their arm.
Yes.
Lost his arm. And so it's this, like, I'm going to, like, let you know so you have control. Because in the same way, if Cecil told me that they weren't comfortable with their character, like, losing an appendage
in a really traumatic way.
Yeah, they'd be like, okay, we're going to have something else. So whether it be scarring or whether it be maybe lost memories, who knows? But it very much is like putting forth this very nebulous idea. But even though the player is going to make a decision, they don't know exactly what's going to happen.
Right.
And so it still has the element of surprise. And so I feel that's always like a good way to do it. In the sense of like making sure that everyone's still comfortable and having fun.
Yeah.
But not necessarily being like, I'm going to here's exactly what's going to happen.
Right, yeah. So that kind of led to this point of, so with especially, I feel like Welcome to Nexus is one of my best works because I got to run it multiple times before running it on stream.
Yeah, you polished it.
Yeah, I really polished it narratively. But I am a huge character creator. Because again, with murder mysteries, and I've been creating OCs for years, it was this thing of you'd get handed a blank character and be like, okay, you need to make this character come to life. You need to make this person real for like 3 hours. And you need to be a fleshed out human being. And, you know, there were times I got the script that morning, right? Yeah. So I'd be looking at this character going, okay, how do I make this guy... how do I make a pool cleaner named... Okay, actually, I don't remember that. How do I make a wedding singer named Dick Johnson feel like a real person? Right?
Yeah.
You know, and so...
And be entertaining.
Yeah, and so that's why naming is tough, because naming's tough.
Naming is tough.
I tend to kind of go for pun names.
I also definitely go for pun names.
It's
either pun names or horrendous.
There's like that good Ace Attorney vibes, but also like the murder mystery parties I did had that. That's a very common whodunit sort of trope. But so what I'll do is like with Welcome to Nexus, I knew from the get-go that Wallace wasn't who he said he was, right? And I knew that it was going to be revealed in a semi-certain way. Right? I'll admit it didn't happen even remotely the way I thought it would. It happened a lot earlier, but it was great. It worked well. So it'd be this thing of, I have no idea what my players are going to throw at me. But I know what... You know what? I need to stop rambling. My training has led me to view all TTRPGs like murder mysteries, right? Right. All of my characters, I know what clues they have, and I know what information they need to get across to the people. I have no idea how it's going to happen, because I don't know what the player's going to say, but I know what information they need to get across. I tend to have like the very base loose points of a character and let them grow alongside the player characters, because it can kind of cater the party or the event or the game.
Okay, yeah.
So that's affected how I play, and that kind of leads to me viewing games a lot like puzzles. So it's like, okay, I know what the big bad guy is this character, but I don't really know what they're doing right now. I don't know how they're the big bad, and then the players will go dig some stuff up, and I'm like, oh, well, this piece fits really well in this other narrative thing, so I'm going to tie these two together real quick. And that's kind of how I do a lot of that.
Yeah, I think D&D also works really well for that in the sense that it turns the game into an even more collaborative storytelling element, and it's not just the DM's world and the players are moving their characters through it. It's a more collaborative story, and then also it leads to like these really weird like organic foreshadowing elements or like thematic reprisals that like as a DM you don't even plan for that,
right?
But when it like appears anyway, it's like
mwah. And the worst part is you often can't point out what you just did, but you know in your heart that that was an awesome foreshadowing moment. And damn, if the players remember this moment, it's gonna pay off so well for replay value. This is for me.
Well, I also wanted to ask, since we're talking kind of how we structure things, how do you plan for your campaigns, your sessions? Is there something that you write down, or is it just like purely off the cuff? How do you like to structure it?
It depends. So I'm in a experimental period of my life right now where I'm kind of I'm trying to figure out how I want to do things creatively. Oh, yeah. Because I found that a lot of the media that I create doesn't fulfill me as well as it could. So I'm exploring new things. But as of right now, subject to change. Yeah. When I set up a murder mystery, that's like as intent. Like when I set up a murder mystery game, which I've run 1.5, we still need to finish that other one. Is I'll figure out. Okay, I know this is how the murder is going to occur. I need to get better at making the death happen sooner because they spend a lot of time in that pre-death bit and that eats up hours of the session.
That's fair, but I'm not going to lie. You're going to put like a bunch of people in the room. They're going to just do shenanigans.
Oh, I know.
It's the curse of gay breakfast.
Yeah, gay breakfast. But like the thing is, it's very rewarding though because then I can have these moments of unexpected foreshadowing of you all interacting with these characters, and I go, well, I know this person isn't the killer, but I do know that they are going to eventually know this, or they'll probably eventually reveal that, or they have this involvement with so and so, and like I've, my players typically know, they can tell pretty quickly who's gonna die. It's usually the biggest asshole in the room, and they just need to figure out who killed the asshole and why specifically, because that's how a lot of my murder mysteries go.
It's helpful.
Listen, if you hate your victim, but I will mostly plan the crime itself, the who, the how, the why, right? Okay. And then I will flesh out all of the suspects as fully as I can. And that requires a lot of making Pinterest boards for aesthetic ideas, making Spotify playlists also for ideas, making, I'll write down a lot of notes. I do this more so for murder mysteries or things like Nexus, where I am planning to foreshadow. Like, Nexus wasn't a murder mystery, but it was kind of a whodunit. Yeah. So I wanted to have the foreshadowing everywhere. In essence, similarly. Yeah. The only difference between Nexus is it was this long-term thing with planned beats. Like, for example, from Welcome to Nexus, I knew from the beginning that someone was going to die. An NPC was going to die for mechanical reasons, to teach them more about the afterlife and blah, 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 and how it works. I will tell you, it took me quite a while to decide who. So the game had started, and I still had no idea who was going to go. Because I wanted to see what would hurt the players just enough, but not be too harmful. I feel like Amir would have been too far. I feel like Winter or Thespis would have been too far.
Yeah, since the player characters were building a relationship with those characters.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't get to continue to pursue that.
Yeah.
If the character's now dead.
Yeah. It's okay. They came back and it was fine. But, yeah. But then with other games like Clocked In or, the Wedding One Shot or, this historical game that I'm coming up with for this upcoming home game, a lot of aesthetic building. So I very much lean into Pinterest boards and Spotify playlists for vibes. And then
the vibes are important.
The vibes are important.
The vibes are
integral. And then when inspiration and energy strike simultaneously, I will try and sit and make notes I tend to start with characters and settings
Okay,
more than anything.
that's fair. Yeah.
And I also like to write down, okay, what am I taking inspiration from? Like different games, I'll take different inspirations. I am also seeing the lighthearted, grumpy noises.
Fair.
But
That's the point.
yeah, see, one, emotions were felt, but it mechanically, it made sense. And also, trust me, you haven't seen the last of him. He's coming back. So yeah, Nessa is the vibe master, and I'm hoping to learn from her. So a lot of my planning, I used to overplan.
I feel like if you like, as DMing goes, the more you DM, the less you're going to overplan.
Yeah, no, I used to overplan really bad, and then when things wouldn't go a certain way, I'd feel like the story didn't go well, and then I'd get really upset about it, and it's this whole thing. And then I was like, you know what? I need to remember those murder mystery shows I did where maybe I read only an eighth of the actual script lines. Like, I need to remember those shows where we are forced to go so off script, but the clients and attendees all had a wonderful time. The actors and I all had a great time together, and everyone, people solved the mystery. It was a successful show.
Yeah.
So what I did was I started getting my base points, and then that's it.
Yeah. So it sounds like you kind of have either like a dollhouse kind of method where you set up like what event has like triggered the rest, and then where everyone is and who they are, and then you've just released the player characters into that for your murder mysteries.
Yeah.
Or you have kind of a loose road map where you have like specific beats that you want to hit.
Yeah, and it kind of ends up as this thing of things are definitely happening around the characters. Like, for example, with the players currently, they are inside the gold standard building, facing off with whatever.
Fun.
But I am planning what's happening elsewhere in town, because you have to figure out what's happening in the world, right?
Yeah.
And if the players go, oh, I'm going to call so-and-so, and I'm like, well, shit, they're involved in something right now, I can play into that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a mixture of the two, where it's like vaguely open world for my sake.
Yeah.
Because that brings me comfort of, again, like, at a murder mystery, let's say I'm playing the victim and I am having an affair with one of the other characters, and that character is being played by one of my friends. I'll go, okay, hey, what are you going to be up to right now, so that when people ask me, about you, and so it kind of reminded me of that, going into a party and going, okay, right now I know that she is off schmoozing with so-and-so. So if anyone asks me about him or her, I can engage with that.
Okay.
But if it doesn't get brought up, information not needed. That's kind of how I prefer to enter games at this point. It also takes a lot less energy.
That's fair.
I am also a combat minimal DM.
I think we both are.
You do combat more than I do, and I like your balance. I really do. I just get annoyed with battle.
That's
as a
fair.
DM specifically.
I feel like it's hard because we also play with very like theater people.
Yes.
Affectionate. In that it's very RP heavy, very character driven and character forward. And so I like combat as a way to do like power fantasy kind of stuff. And also just like very like dire straits type of thing. So that's why I like to still sprinkle it in. Because it's like D&D is like this system itself focuses on combat like a fair amount. So like if you want to use your fun things that you get as you level up, you
gotta use combat.
Yeah. So and so I like how you plan things by vibes. You do the playlists, you do the Pinterest boards. I know you'll find stuff on Twitter and then you'll send it to various people to be like, hey,
this is so and so.
This is so and so. TikTok videos, hey,
this is so and so.
Characters.
Yeah.
And I honestly love that very much. I love the kind of character building you have. Because like I said, so I feel like a lot of the stuff I admire from in your DMing style is like stuff I struggle with. So I always admire how you like build a scene.
Yeah.
So you do the physical descriptions and you do like you are able to slow things down as we like witness the tragic moments in the dire straits, and you do all of that beautifully well. And so I always love to see it. Because I know, so on my end of the spectrum of planning wise.
Yes.
So, I don't have Pinterest boards, and I rarely do playlists. And so my way of planning tends to be, so we recently wrapped up our home game, which had all player characters were, kind of like minions, of various like supervillains. So it's supervillains and superheroes, but everyone that like all the players were playing like the low tier, like the lowest rung.
We were the Goonian.
You were the goons.
We were the goons.
It was unionized.
We were the unionized goons, the Goonian.
So we recently wrapped up that campaign, and I put my DM notes into the Discord to be like, here's what I was working from. And so Goonians is also the game that I made the most notes for. Usually I just like do it off the cuff. I get an idea of what I want to cover in a session and then just do it. But we would get to a point where like during the final moments, like final battle and things like that, I like to have like old NPCs come forward to help and old allies to come assist. It's a beautiful trope, and I will beat it to death.
And she also knows it makes me cry every single time. Chronicles of Narnia, cry every time. Summer Wars, cry every time.
It's easy teams.
Yes, yeah.
But that becomes a lot harder if you've been pulling everything out your butt and you don't remember the names of any of your NPCs.
Yeah, so you did. Nessa, here's the thing. The first campaign Nessa tried to run was when I made Amir. Well, okay, Amir has been a character of mine since like high school.
But first time playing Amir.
But making him a D&D character.
Yes.
Happened your first campaign that you ran for us.
Yes.
And it started as a very like mission story of the week, episodic.
Yeah, that's honestly how a lot of my campaigns start. And then it gets...
And then Nessa gets ideas.
Well, it's also like building off of what player characters do, and that's kind of what comes into it. So, Goonians, I had the most DM notes. And
yes.
So what I would do is I would have a section where I would put the NPCs and put their names, and then like a brief description of what they look like, and just like things to remember about them.
Yeah.
And then for each session, I would have bullet points of just the beats I wanted to hit. So kind of like the setup, the beats of what may happen, and then I would write out word for word things that were like I wouldn't be able to just pull out my butt.
Right.
So for instance,
yes,
I knew, okay, so one of the missions that will be offered to the characters would be to pretend to be hostages for this supervillain who is trying to lure out this anti-hero in order for them to become nemesis.
Hey, Nessa.
Nemesis. Yes.
Nessa.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Can you tell the chat who they were?
Okay, so I put Baby in my campaign.
And
Pollux.
You put Baby and Pollux as NPCs, and Baby was an anti-hero, and no,
Baby was a
vigilante.
No, Pollux is a vigilante / anti-hero. Baby is technically a villain, but on
purely on paper
misunderstandings.
Yeah, and I love them. But anyway, yeah, we had to be their hostages.
Yeah, so it was my birthday. So I got to choose.
You didn't have to do it on your birthday. You could have done it on my birthday, and that would have been a treat.
So I got to choose. But in essence, so my bullet points were, okay, here are the NPCs that are going to show up. Here's what is going to be asked of the player characters, whether or not they work along with it or not. And then I wrote out word for word. So for instance, I thought it would be fun if Baby, the tiefling supervillain, who is new to supervillainy, wanted to have like a monologue ready but isn't very good with words. So he in essence gave the player characters thank you, Shusho. He in essence gave the player characters a fill-in-the-blank Mad Libs of a villain monologue. And so I wrote out the villain monologue and left the blanks for like noun, adjective, adverb, and so forth, and asked the player characters for that.
I'm pulling it up right now.
It went as one would expect when you give players any sense of agency.
Oh, it was...
It was honestly beautiful.
I'm trying to pull it up because it was hilarious.
I know I put it in my DM notes.
I'm going to the...
But, so I had that, and then I had a bullet point for, like, when Pollux shows up, how things are going to go, and what the player characters would have to deal with. So it's all bullet pointed as, like, the beats I want to hit, but I never expected specific things from the player characters. And so I kept all of that in my DM notes to remember what happened previously. So I knew moving forward what happened to other characters, what did player characters do that the NPCs would remember, things like that. So, so I kind of like structure it that way. It also helps me in actually building plot moving forward. So for instance, if I know that the player characters have pissed off a certain somebody, then I can bring them back already pissed and and deciding actions to take. And so that leads to feature plots and feature sessions and so forth. And so that's kind of how it builds. I know my campaigns also tend to be, I'm only going to do these little like bite size, like each session is going to be a one problem to solve, a monster of the week type of thing. But it then very quickly turns into this like big plot arc type of thing where you have the main baddie and you're just like gearing up against him and so forth. It turns out that way. I don't know how.
Honestly, your games are really like... They're very satisfying. Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
Yeah. So when I said bullet points, it's not helpful bullet points.
No, it's really not.
But it's what works for me, the DM.
No, and that's
what matters.
That's what matters. I'm just trying to find the one Mad Libs. I saw that and I was like, oh, highlighted. But was it before or after the party?
I think it was after the party.
That's Day in the Life. Inspector Tragic. Oh, that's when we met Booker.
Maybe before that? I don't know.
Anyway.
She
likes to make a lot of really cool props and stuff. Like, she'll make, like, news articles for, like, a character's like, oh, a character died, and we gotta solve their murder, so she made the news article about the death.
That was fun. I like to do that more, but it does take more energy, so it kind of dwindled as the campaign went on.
That's so fair.
But I do love having props. They're so much fun.
It helps with the immersion.
Yeah.
And, like, especially with murder mysteries, I definitely want to start also getting into that.
It's very fun, because I like to, instead of expositing, to have, like, something else that players can kind of, like, chew through.
Mm-hmm.
So players, the PCs found a dead body, and they were framed for its murder. And so they had to find the real murderer in order to clear their names. Mm. And so instead of me being like, here's what the body looks like, blah, 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 I created this article that they find the next day, telling them that A, they've been framed, and B, here's what the body looked like, and here's the evidence that they'll have to kind of sort through. And so that way the player characters can go through and find what they think is the most important information and the avenues that they want to continue down to find. Oh, Cecil found it. Cecil found the monologue.
Oh, God.
Yay!
I don't know if Twitch will allow it. That might be a long message.
That's fair. If nothing else, you can do a couple of sentences, and I think we could get
Or send it on Discord, and I'll read it to everyone.
Yeah, I figured you get the picture.
Yeah, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So that actually turns into, like, another question I wanted to ask.
Okay.
Which is a little bit about pacing.
Oh, really quick.
Okay, yeah. So here. Oh, Cecil was able to put it
Okay.
in chat. Yes.
So, I will, all caps are the things that we put in as our group.
Yes.
All right. Well, if it isn't my tired arch nemesis, I have been sexily waiting for your arrival, tense with longing. You see, I have taken these hungry persons hostage. They are merely innocent strippers that I have lunged
Who knows? Because
from the hell.
It's all bad libs, so no one knows what the
we had no idea what any of this was until she started reading it out loud. And if you don't stop me, I will use them. You must abuse me with all of your might if you want to save these pickles. And y'all, in character, we were fed up. Out of character, we were in tears. Laughing so hard.
Mad libs.
Brilliant. Anyway, I'm so sorry. I'm also getting hungry, so I'm getting very spacey.
Oh no. Do we want to take a break?
Cause no, I'd have to go to the front office to get food. I'm gonna get it after.
Okay. Well, so I wanted to jump off of this and how we kind of structure things. So talk a little bit about pacing.
Okay.
So, because I know with me, when I'm trying to like pace things out in a campaign, I do it kind of like session by session.
Yeah.
Because I want like high tension, low tension, high tension, low tension. So swoosh, 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 swoosh. More arcs.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you with your campaigns, how do you like to break tension? Because you can't be high tension all the time.
No.
It's too much, it gets boring.
Yeah, so Nessa and I were actually talking about this not too long ago. Where she likes the very high tension, low tension, high tension, low tension. I'm really bad at low tension sessions. Even my low tension sessions will have like suddenly there's a robber, you know, because I'm like, okay, something needs to happen, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I tend to keep things fairly higher tension with little like breathers. And I like to sprinkle breather because I like to keep things kind of higher tension, especially with like my current with Clocked In, because we're kind of working on the build up.
Okay.
And so I'm getting a lot of things in motion. But using it with a lot of like comedic moments, or leaving a lot of room for them to decide to do something fun. Okay. Or I'll know, oh, you and this like your character and this character we ship them, so we'll give them a little moment. Or, oh, you want to have an interaction with your parents. Oh,
of course. Hi, Caitlin. Thank you for stopping by.
Yeah.
That sleep well.
Those great time differences. Sleep well.
Time zones.
Yeah. So
it sounds like, so instead of, because I go more like session by session, I'll plan if it's going to be like a high tension session or a low tension session. And you tend to like keep it higher, but then in session have these like quick breaks, like just quick like scenes almost.
Yeah, and the thing is because I typically won't even think about the tone of the session. Mm-hmm. That's not something I think of. What I think of is what needs to happen.
That's fair. Yeah.
Right? And so if they're in the middle of something really heavy and it's got to keep going, well, it's going to keep going because my brain is kind of like, well, realistically, this problem isn't just going to go away the next day because they need a nap. No. They're going to have to deal with it, especially because there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of like stuff like that.
Yeah.
So consequences will either come and bite them many months in the future. Stuff is stewing. Or it's immediate. So I tend to pepper it in every session. So there's high tension and relief in ideally every session. If a session is particularly heavy, like when a character dies or if they had really intensive combat, then I'll find a way to make the next session lighter, but it's usually got to be something pretty heavy for me to even like think about it.
That's fair. Yeah.
What about you?
So I like to do high tension, low tension, and kind of like, I think similarly, we each think of each session, okay, here's what needs to happen in this session, here's what beats we need to hit in the session. And so I think of mine as, okay, here are some beats we need to hit in the session. And I also think of it as like, how can we, like if there's certain information that the player characters need to find, how can we do that in a way that is more lenient, or so forth. So, for instance, In Gunions, so in our recent home campaign, we had a big moment. And then there was going to be more big moments leading up to the final battle. So in essence, the city went on lockdown and player characters had to escape the city as it was being taken over. Big moment, high tension. And then they were going to need to save about 4 of their beloved NPCs who have been caught. Another like high tension. And so I'm like, okay, that's a lot. I can't do all of this back to back. We can't have that and then save all the NPCs and then beat the final boss. Like that's shwoomp. So I'm like, okay, we need a low tension time. And with the low tension, it's going to be a preparing for saving everyone, gathering supplies, resources, things like that. So they escaped the city. And I'm like, okay, so next session, you're going to go into this NPC's, like, fishing cabin out in the woods. And you're going to have time to just plan all these things out. And I'm also going to make it that you have to do some chores to kind of give them something to do, but also to spark either a collaborativeness of them working with one another or time to just like think on their own. It led to one character having father-son bonding time with his shadow spawn entity he summons, which is great. Love Klaus.
I fucking love Klaus.
So I can build that like low tension time in to break it up before like ratcheting up into the high tension upcoming sessions and things like that. And so that's why I like to break it up by session that way.
Yeah.
But I also tend to have sillier sessions.
Yeah.
Especially at the beginning.
Nessa is a sillier DM, and I do love that, and I want to kind of work on channeling that a bit.
Thank you. It's one of those things where I think that, like, if D&D is just, like, RP, combat, shopping, I'm like, oh, but that's boring. What if? And then I think of, like, okay, wouldn't it be funny if blank? And so, wouldn't it be funny if I put all my player characters through speed dating?
Yeah.
Or wouldn't it be funny if I just traumatized all my characters by putting them through a job interview and make them answer very silly questions
with really hard to pick answers.
Yes. So
like, dear God, that interviewer.
So it was one of those things where, so that session I planned it as so their main goal wasn't to get a job. Their main goal was to find information about the company that is supporting this superhero that they think is doing bad things, and we need to find out what those bad things are. And the best way to get into said company to find this out would be to get a job there and to survey the area. So I'm like, hey, want to go into this job interview? And so I got to pick out a bunch of job interview questions that very quickly ranged from your average job interview questions to the most ridiculous ones I could find, such as if you were a fruit, what fruit would you be?
Yeah, I don't think my character did very well in those. My character had anxiety and didn't. I mean, honestly, I think he and Jason's character really, really, really didn't want to be there.
That's fair.
Oh, yes. Yeah. A question from the chat.
Yeah, go ahead and ask questions. Like, I'm just throwing things out there because there are things I like to talk about. But I also want to hear what y'all want to hear.
Yeah. So you're more than happy to ask your questions.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Oh, no. Do you want some of my tea? It's energized tea.
Oh. For DM advice, if there's time. Yes, of course.
Yeah. Do you want just, like, random DM tips, or do you have anything specifically that you want?
Yeah, anything in particular with advice on. That's true also, Dwala. Honestly, no one wanted to be there, But one of our party members was like, we gotta go, and if you all don't come with me, I'll go by myself. And we all were like, ugh. And so we went with her. I mean, it ended up working out because, you know...
You got your 1-day internship.
Well, we got the information we needed.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it was a success, but it was also like...
I thought it was fun.
And Celdis ended up with my phone number.
Yeah,
At what cost?
Oh, I know. Also, Lotus House is very much set up as a high tension, low tension too. In the sense of like all the most high tension, like event based rooms are like towards the end of a floor.
Yeah.
And then we tend to break up the more like dramatic and then just dark rooms with sillier stuff. So, Micah's room.
Yes.
Where we had the calculus riddle or
the fashion show.
Yeah, the fashion show and things like that. And just like having that in between the let's see here. There were the lesbian dragonborn.
Oh yeah.
That was intense. And Dalabash also intense. So things like that.
Yeah. I am stuck thinking how to wrap up a campaign in a way that makes it satisfactory. Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. What details would you like to share about us?
And it hurt me.
Or share about it with us?
Thank you, Cecil. But yeah, Lotus House is fun.
It was very fun. Honestly, there's a lot of things that I've stolen from it mechanically.
Okay.
And it's very fun I'm very glad that we got to run it together.
Me too.
Yeah. Do you have tips for ending stuff and it not feeling like, well, okay, we're done? I would suggest, one, checking in with your characters and asking if there's anything that your players feel they need, like anything that they still want for their character. So check in. It's like, hey, is there anything that you've wanted for your character that we haven't gotten to do yet? Is there another character you want more time with? You know, and letting them, like how I view it is my players always, it's like this thing of, my players always know they're going to get a happy ending, but they have to earn it. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not just going to hand them a happy ending. They're going to have to fight for it.
Yeah.
But it's there. Yeah. Now, if they slack off and decide, well, we're just going to guarantee this happy ending, I will give them a bad ending. But yeah, just communicating with your players, asking what they want, what they feel they need. And also ask yourself the same question. Are there any characters that you wanted to do more with? Is there a plot point that you wanted to bring back and wrap up? You know, just because you're asking your players questions, you should also ask yourself the same questions, because you're also a player.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point.
The layout of the campaign is set so it can be long or a one-shot. The one-shot version is randomized castle in the skies with treasure. Ooh.
That's fun. Also, yay, Cecil. Our home game of Lotus House was super fun too.
Yeah. Also, my apologies for all the yawning. My brain and body have decided I am done.
Oh no.
The idea is that my players give me what their characters want as a reason for traveling with the party.
Okay. That's very good. I like that. I think we also did something similar with Lotus House in that, like, what does your character desire?
Yeah, why are they coming to this place?
And then playing off of that. I think, so for me, I always try to think of it as, like, have we completed each player character's character arc?
Yeah.
So, for instance, like, towards the end of Goonions, I was thinking, like, okay, Cecil's character Dvalin has shucked off the burden of their sentient weapon and also their arm, and but has also like come on out the other side with this like new like appreciation for his mom and then his friends who helped him through it, things like that. At the end of it, Casper's character Aster got to finally be free of a debt that he had from the very beginning, and became more confident in his abilities to protect himself.
We can call it I got out of a debt. What I like to call is I set my that person on fire. I learned why wizards like fireball.
That's fair.
And that's really reducing it. But yeah, Aster got to break free from the chains, and Aster didn't. No one broke Aster free. Aster broke himself free, and so that was very satisfying.
Yeah. Our friend Olivia's character got to reignite with the history of her lost parents. Jason's character got to like recontextualize his childhood trauma? Question mark?
Hey, listen.
Wow. So like I like to think of it as like all the characters have changed in a sense and have faced themselves in a way. And then also with going with like ending the campaign itself, like I usually like to have a big bad. It makes for like being able to have like a final, like a finality to it.
Yeah.
And I know that like with treasure, things like that, it's very like tangible. It's like you have this, goodbye.
Well, you have the route open of, well, give your players the space to, okay, you got this treasure. What does your character do with it?
Yeah.
And let them explain what their character does with this treasure.
Like an epilogue.
Yeah.
I think it can also be a like I like ironies. I like price and sacrifice. So it can even be a thing of like they've gone so far in order to get this treasure. They're right there at the brink of it. What if there was like one last thing they needed to do? So one last sacrifice they need to make. Is it them forgetting all the memories that they've now created with this entire party? And are they willing to do that? Or is it there's not enough treasure for everybody? And
so they gotta fight.
Yeah, so they have to fight one another. And if so, would they? Or would someone sacrifice their share? And like I think inter-party conflict at the end of a campaign is not a bad thing, but you also have to like make sure your players are okay with it, because inter-party conflict can go south.
Yeah, and like the thing is, if done well, inter-party conflict can really move a story forward. So, discussing that between you and your characters to figure out, or your players to figure out what they're comfortable with, is very important. But if they're down for it, then it can be very useful.
Oh, yeah. I like to have a big thing at the very end. So it's a, like, trying to think of it as, because, like, I usually have, like, a big final battle. And so there's going to be a big party after the big final battle. And that's what I like to do. And so, like, that's why even with Lotus House, you got to see what happens after the house is gone.
Yeah.
As everyone's able to talk with one another and make their plans going forward and so forth.
Ooh, inter-party conflict.
Conflict.
Very excited. But, yeah, so hopefully that helps give you some ideas, Shusho.
I was thinking, so maybe one last question.
Okay.
All right. So, what? You know what? I'll ask about in planning sessions.
Okay.
What are the most fun sessions that you've had?
Oh, okay. What are some of the most fun sessions I've had? Oh gosh, it's hard to think back to specifics.
Okay,
why don't you go first?
Yeah, I was going to say I can give some examples. So, like, I think I have, like, fun in the sense of, like, I've put something forward and the player characters have to deal with it. Well, deal with it.
Oh, deal with it. Yeah.
Right. Or, like, just get through it. And then also, like, player characters and players, like, doing something completely unexpected and it just, like, whoosh. So, the things that I find, like, fun would be like the job interview session, or the the baby hostages session, because like I got to play with something new in the
Yeah.
sense of I'm going to put you through a job interview, or I'm going to do Mad Libs, or when you had to do the internship thing,
Mhm.
I'm going to make one of the player characters have to remember an incredibly long Starbucks order.
Oh god, I think that was Dvalin.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
boy.
then you have to go all the way to the Starbucks and then recite all of these orders.
Oof.
And then you also have to make sure the last incredibly long Starbucks order isn't incorrect.
Yeah.
So I find those fun. I find it, because it's a new type of challenge as opposed to just like combat.
Yeah.
And it like flexes certain skills, and it flexes skills in the players in addition to the player characters.
Yeah.
So I do like putting those forward. I do like being silly. And then everyone groans but goes through it.
Yep.
And then I also like the ones where player characters just like blow it out of the park with something new. So for instance, in Goonions, the player characters had to like they're framed for murder, had to solve the murder mystery. And so instead of going to like the top suspects, they went to the best friend of the victim and then pretended to channel the spirit of the victim. And the best friend, who had a crush on the victim before said victim died, is then confronted with this specter of what could have been. And that's where they got information.
No, I'm not taking that. Yannick and Arby did
Okay,
that.
two.
Dvalin and Aster went and fist fought someone at the morgue, okay? Big difference.
Yeah.
We went, befriended a mortician,
Yeah.
and fist fought the secretary at the morgue. Big difference, okay? We didn't emotionally traumatize anyone. We befriended someone and
Got your ass kicked.
well, but she was also a bitch and needed to get whooped up. Listen, she was so mean. She also destroyed us. I think we ran away. I think we fled. I don't think she won the fight. We ran away.
So
But
yeah.
it was very fun. It was
it was
very
super fun. Never saw that coming.
No.
I also like at the very end, Jason's character Yannick was in essence haunted and being possessed by another entity, and trapped that entity in his character's like childhood trauma in a portion of his brain, and just locked it there. And I never saw that coming. I loved it to bits. So I find that's the most, like, one of the most fun things is when you get to be surprised by
Yeah.
what happens, or you just get to do like a silly thing.
Yeah.
I love that very much.
For me, what constitutes a good session is when the story feels like it moved forward well.
Okay, yeah.
So, and that doesn't need to be like I have a grand moment. Like one of my favorite sessions is when the monsters attacked in Welcome to Nexus and Amir got injured during the fight,
Mhm.
right? And he was never gonna die.
Yeah,
That was never a possibility.
yeah.
But I didn't exactly expect like Jason to have Magna like step in and like protect him, and then them like I didn't it gave just this sense of like kind of showing who the player characters were and their ways of helping, and them kind of connecting with this community of like lost souls in Nexus. And also it was kind of this point of, hey, you're not safe, and it's kind of that so when something kind of big narratively, whether it's for the story itself or for a particular character, because like there's been times where it's like the session itself, like I'm not disappointed by it. It was a session, it was a good time, but like a show is a show, a session's a session.
Yeah.
But like a particular moment will be great because like someone in the party had a character development moment,
Okay.
or the characters bonded in a way that I hadn't expected. And I'm like, those anything that really pushes a narrative forward in a very satisfying way is also any chance I can to, and this is a personal thing that I love to do as a DM, is give them a beloved character and then force them to see the ugly side of that character. It's like, all right, you love so-and-so. Do you love them when they're in the full swing of their trauma? You love this character, but do you want to see them at the lowest they've ever been?
You know what's funny? Is I do the opposite.
Oh, yeah? That's fair.
I make assholes, and then I make them love the asshole.
Yeah, she loves to very much like Miles Edgeworth us. She'll introduce a character, and we're like, God, this asshole. This fucking
this
guy.
Dick.
This right dick. And then by the end of it, it's like, you're our dad now.
I would die for this dick.
Hi, did you just... Vanessa. But Vanessa.
I'm gonna smack you.
Did you just say?
No.
Anyway, so it's like, yeah, we do the very opposite of it, because it's like, I feel like it's almost this side of you show, it was Enma, it was Lawrence, it's like we knew it was going to come with Ultra Magnus, like we knew it was happening because we already knew Ultra Magnus because Transformers, but like, I feel like it's almost this thing of you like to show that everyone can have like a part of them to love, right? And that like you can, even if you wouldn't like this person in real life, you really bring us in with this fleshed out character, and it kind of almost pushes this sense of everyone is worthy of love. You just got to get to know people, versus it's like the same of you got to get to know people, but I like to play with everyone has secrets. I like to play with a character's secrets. I like to play with what they keep from everyone else, because I feel like when you compare what someone shows versus what they hide, it gives you a really interesting view of a character.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I do honestly really love that.
And I also love it when my players have secrets.
Yes.
So I love to play into that, and I love to like give little things that like hint or poke or foreshadow that.
Yeah, and you get to play with the kind of ironies of like,
like Dee Dee and her patron, for example, before it was revealed.
Yeah.
Many episodes ago.
Yeah, I was also going to put forth like if someone had like a criminal past that no one else knows about, just having an NPC being like, everyone who does crime should be in jail, and then that person has to be like, totes.
Everyone. But yeah, so it's a lot of fun. Love playing with like the darker side of a character. That's one of the reasons why I love playing with Amir, is he is like quintessential. Like, look at this guy. He's sunshine.
So ideal.
He is like your ideal human being, but then you get to know him.
Yeah.
And he is so flawed and so broken and so depressed and anxious and confused. And then it always just bubbles over into a mess, and I love seeing such a tight-lipped character fall apart.
Yeah, and we love them all the more for it.
Yeah, and I also love when the player characters get to do that. Like, I love when there's moments where, like, a character who's normally, like, you see a player character who's normally shy and timid, like, stand up for something and put their foot down. Or, like, if a character's trauma gets triggered and I know it, but the other players don't know, and, like, the player character with the traumatized character leaning into that, and the others going, whoa, what's happened here?
Yeah.
Because of like this secret.
The secrets.
Yeah.
Boiling over, coming out.
And I always love playing characters with secrets. It's always a whole lot of fun. Whether it's like I had to fake my death and I have a new identity, or I'm far more sad than I appear to be. That's a very common one.
Yeah.
What are some other secrets I've had? The second one I gave is a pretty common one, actually. I think that covers most of my characters. They're more sad than they let on. Oops.
Yeah. Good time. So
yeah.
So like that. So how you bring in a fun session is when like the story is enriched by it.
Yes.
So either the characters have like connected with something as part of the plot, or the NPCs, or the player characters have grown in some sort of fashion. So that enrichment, that like growth and development is just
So yeah,
I love that. I love that a lot.
and I do like that we have like a very opposite approach of like you introducing a character like ugly side first.
That's honestly also why I love your villains very
Oh,
much. Like my villains tend to be very shallow in the sense of like, this dude's a dick. You want to kill him?
Yeah, I mean that's been the past few games we've played.
You just you want to.
I mean, granted, the Transformers one wasn't so simple.
No.
But the rest of them were pretty,
yeah.
I mean, they were still very satisfactory. That fight with Amir against the giant robot, still one of my favorite fights.
It's one of those things where, like, I don't know, I think I play more into, like, the power fantasy of it, of, like, hey, this is this, like, representation of something that you hate.
Yeah.
In real life.
Yeah.
Do you want to kill it?
Which is very, very cathartic. D&D isn't therapy, but I'll tell you, it's very cathartic.
But I do, that's why I love your villains, because they're, like, they have complexities, they have dualities, they're a person and not just a representation, and I love that so much, and I do want to steal that eventually. I'm working on it.
Go for it. Yeah, like the thing is with me,
it's a skill.
I love villains. I have always loved villains. I've been the kind of person to always empathize with villains far more than I ever have the heroes. And so with that, I've had a lot of practice making villains and making them real, making them people. And yeah, sure, we all haven't met a Meredith or a Trudy or I'm trying to think of like anyone who's been even like an antagonist in like
the one dude in Lotus House.
The one dude in Lotus House. I mean, Trudy is
obviously a me villain because he ain't worth shit.
Well, and like the thing is, like with everything is like Trudy's bad because she's a high up at Gold Standard, but there's a lot of other baddies that are yet to be met in Gold Standard. But my favorite trope with a villain, and I can only play it so many times, is the wolf in sheep's clothing. I always love when you have a character that you don't suspect.
Yeah.
And then they're the baddie. Or a baddie. When I did Murder Mystery Parties, one of my favorites was playing this one show where I would play as a detective, right? And over the course of the show, I would get meaner and meaner and meaner because by the end of it, you realize I'm not a detective at all. I'm the person who orchestrated this whole event, and you've all fucked it up, and now I'm just gonna handle it myself, and then I die. But it's like this thing of I walk into that party knowing I'm a villain. No one in here knows. In fact, they think I'm on their side because I've got ACAB, ACAB. But I've got the badge, I've got the coat, I've got the hat.
Yeah.
I'm at a murder mystery party. They're gonna think I'm on their side, but I'm not. And it's I think it's the foreshadowing that can come with a good wolf in sheep's clothing villain.
Yeah, and this like slow reveal, and then after the reveal, people can look back on it and be like, "Oh, it was there the whole time."
Yeah, because actually in this version of Welcome to Nexus, they knew that Meredith was one of the big baddies much earlier than any other game, because in the first session it took y'all killing Roger to reveal that she was even a threat. So basically they killed Roger and they're like, we're free, and then Meredith was like, haha, I'm free, and they're like, fuck, we gotta fight Meredith, and so they had two fights. And then the second time they went to fight Roger, didn't fight Roger, because they got him to agree to join their side, and this was Ashley, Tristan, and Perry and Gabrielle as players. Everyone knows Ashley here. And it's just, the thing is, you have to be very careful because there's a lot of easy tropes to fall into, like the victim is the villain. Yeah. I accidentally fell into that the first time with Meredith. So you got to be really careful with like not making it that, oh, this abuse victim is actually the villain all along.
Yeah, because I think that came like back to back with your previous one, where it was also
a similar thing.
Yeah.
And
because
I was working through some stuff at the time.
That's fair.
But it did get pointed out to me by my players, especially the third one who was in our group, like, hey, this doesn't sit well. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. And that's, you know what, another piece of DM advice. Listen to your players. Don't think you're the best DM. Be open to criticism. Listen to your players.
Yeah. It's always like, you're always learning, always growing. And I think that's like a good place to end this. Is that like, always learning new skills, always growing from it. And like, as long as everyone has fun, you did it.
Yeah.
You did the D&D.
Yeah, as long as everyone had a good time, you succeeded in leading a fun game.
Yeah. But I know that I personally always like to learn new skills, and like to continue to hone my DMing skills, and so this is why I also wanted to have this chat with you, Casper, and not only because my laptop died, and so I had to think of something new, but also I admire you as a DM, and I'd like to pick your brain and like to know where you're pulling all your stuff from, so I can steal them.
Oh, please do. Everyone, please steal my ideas. Like, if you're inspired by something I do in a game, you steal it. If I use a joke that you like, steal it. Like, listen, again, being an improv actor, the whole thing that we would do is, oh, I like that bit, I'm gonna steal it. And it was just everyone stealing everything from everyone. Like, my character voices, half of them I stole from other people. My pompous rich man voice, I specifically stole this from my friend Joey. Now, Joey is a right gentleman, but he plays the pompous ass. And so that voice is flat out stolen from Joey.
And then I stole Casper's Amir voice.
For evil.
For evil,
Nessa,
and evil alone.
Nessa only uses it, like, realistically, when she plays him as an NPC. Other than that, it's sin and chaos and crimes.
I like to...
You know, Nessa, remember when you said that this was a good point to wrap up stream?
Yeah. Thank you. And also thank you, Cecil, for the compliments, since we do good, complex characters.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I see Shusho agreeing, so thank you both very much.
And yeah, so we'll wrap up here. Thank you all for coming. This has honestly been really fun to just like chill, chat, talk D&D, because I love talking about D&D.
Yeah.
And even though talking about DMing, soon I get to be a player
in
something
any
day now.
Either Cecil or I are going to start DMing at some point.
Or Jason.
Or Jason. Yep. All three of us are working on building games. But yeah, I am now very tired. So it's dinner time. Also, again, a reminder, we are moving, so I want to give a heads up that our next list streams will be going on a bit of a pause because we don't have the spoons, energy, time, or any of that to work on DMing. So Jason and I have both agreed that we need time to focus on the move and not planning or DMing anything. And also, some of the other players are also moving. So a lot of us in the Thesperians crew are moving right now to new homes.
And we'll see how next Friday is looking, but we have no guarantees.
We have no guarantees on how Monday streams are going to be looking. We know this upcoming Monday there won't be any, but after that we'll see. And we're not sure about this week's Friday stream. We'll try and stream when we can, but it may be like about a month of weird schedulings, and then come September we're gonna have a lot more stuff set in stone. So expect a lot more streams on this channel and on Thesperians come September. Until then, maybe a little wonky. So
wonk happens.
Wonk does happen. Now, before we go, let me find someone to raid. Oh, let's raid Finny again.
And in the meantime, while the raid's being set up, thank you everyone for coming. I'm Nessa, he's Casper. If you want to support us, you can subscribe to the channel, or you can go to any of the stuff there, or up here, to do whatever you wish. Subscribe, like, donate,
all the stuff. Thank you, Nessa. We're going to wrap up to our end screen, and then here in a moment we're going to go raid a friend of mine, so please be sure to stay in the chat so we can go show them some love. I'm just going to hop to the end screen, Everyone, please take care. Hydrate or die straight. That is a threat. And hopefully we'll see you all next Friday. If not, we'll give updates on Twitter. Bye-bye.